live and worldwide. Here's Brody Brazil.
A lot of times lately, you guys know I make a YouTube video and I also keep the audio for a podcast episode, but this time around, I'm doing it the other way around. I'm making this podcast and I'm also going to publish it on my YouTube channel. Hopefully you enjoy the content and the timeliness of it. I'm recording this here on an average Tuesday night where both Joe Thornton and Patrick Marleau made respective splashes. Now, we'll get to tying these guys both together here in just a second, tying them in together. I'll begin with Joe. You may have seen the interview he did at the NHL Awards where he was asked flat out, are you going to come back next season? What's the latest? What's the deal? Joe's initial comment and response and promise was to come back for 10 years, which I found amusing. I found, well, not surprising, right? We all pretty much had the feeling that next season was definitely going to feature a 40-year-old graybeard out there. But Joe, in the end of this interview, he only went from joking about 10 years to being very serious about 5 more years. So again, look, I don't want to count how many years are left, just to know that we're on a year-to-year basis, and next year is a for sure thing. He's going to get the contract all worked out. Doug Wilson has said it's going to happen. Joe Thornton has said it's going to happen. So nice to hear it from Joe himself. Again, that's what we all assumed, but nice for number 19 to just flat out say it. He's back next season. But tying this to Patrick Marleau, and the report came out that Patrick would only want to come to San Jose if the Leafs are trading him away. I mean, your mind goes there already, right? Wouldn't this reunion be sweet? Not just Marleau on the Sharks, but Marleau and Thornton together again on the Sharks. 2 guys that were drafted 1 and 2 respectively in the 1997 draft. And now this opportunity to play together into the year 2020. Just think about that for a second. Drafted in 97 and reunited teammates in 2020. Both as 40-year-olds. I mean, talk about the ultimate in longevity, especially in a very physical sport like the NHL and the kind of miles these guys have put on over the years. But again, as you consider Thornton and Marleau together on the Sharks, again, a lot of people are separated. Some are talking on social media, fans are, with their hearts. Others are saying that the brain has a different reaction, right? It's the difference between what the heart wants and what the brain is thinking about. And there's definitely 2 schools, 2 reactions on social media as I've gauged it so far tonight. Again, the report was that Patty only wants to come to San Jose. There were other talks about the LA Kings being involved. I heard the Avalanche being a potential landing spot, but clearly what the Leafs are trying to do is clear up some cap space so that they can sign younger players, specifically the retention of Mitch Marner. But you look at San Jose and you look at Toronto now, and for as much as the Sharks just signed Erik Karlsson to a huge deal, the biggest in franchise history, it sure is interesting to know that Toronto would do everything they could, likely, to move Marleau. And if Marleau only wants to go to San Jose, and he's got, by the way, a full no-move clause, this really complicates the matter. And this really narrows it down to something specific happening. And again, that's why I find it so interesting. But there are a lot of obstacles. There are a lot of hurdles here. Not Tomasz hurdles, but jumping over type hurdles. And a lot of it comes down to money. In fact, not much of this is personal. I guess really there's 3 aspects to this, right? There's the money part, there's the personal part, and there's the hockey part. The money part is the toughest part by far. The personal part is easy. Patrick and his family have roots here in San Jose. He's adored still as a individual, as a hockey player. You know what he's all about. You know what type of teammate he would be again. But there's the hockey part. I'll get to that later in the season he's coming off of in just a second. But how does this work money-wise? Well, the Leafs, they can retain up to 50% of his salary. But even if they do that, the Sharks are still going to be on the hook for more than $3 million next season. Their cap space right now still limited, especially limited because of the monstrous signing of Erik Karlsson. It was a big deal. Sharks had to go out and spend top dollar. They did. They're also committed to several other high-end players, Brent Burns and Logan Couture, Evander Kane, Marc-Edouard Vlasic, and they also, need to re-sign Joe Pavelski and Thornton and Timo Meier and Kevin Labanc. I could go on and on. So again, the money part is where this gets sticky. I did see an idea floated on Twitter earlier tonight. I had a good laugh at this. It's the proposal of basically a 3-team deal where Marleau gets traded twice and the Leafs retain 50%, another team retains 50%, and then he goes to the Sharks. Now, wait a second. Isn't that like money laundering Patrick Marleau? Is that legal? I mean, not like by government laws. Like, is that NHL legal? Is that even possible? I'm not sure about that. And I'm also not sure what that middleman team would want, because obviously they're doing two sides a huge favor, if that's even possible. But going back to Patty in his last season, 37 points, his lowest output since the rookie campaign. And I don't think that's encouraging. I'm not here to say that that's indicative of a trend of what this next season's going to be like wherever he plays. But it's definitely a consideration. And I'm also curious. Well, I'm not curious. I mean, I think the Sharks would recognize this. It would be interesting to see where if they got him back, right? If this actually happened, where and how would the Sharks use him? You're talking about two 40-year-olds on the ice on an every night basis. It's not common. I'm not saying that as a disrespect. These are two legends, two great hockey players. But I don't know how many teams in the history of the league have had this situation, two guys at that age contributing and expected to be key parts. But I think you saw what happened to Jumbo last year, third line center, playing a couple less minutes every night. Pete DeBoer found a tremendous way to keep number 19 effective out there, and especially who he got paired with in Marcus Sorensen on one side, Kevin Labanc on the other. Two pure scorer type players, and the ultimate assister in the middle. It made a lot of sense. They found a great role for Joe Thornton, the Sharks did, and they kept him very effective, and he was healthy. That was a most important thing. He was healthy last season. So you'd have to think, and I have no clue what it would be. What would a role for Patty be like? Again, this is all hypothetical. If he came back to the Sharks, you'd really have to figure out, if you're Pete DeBoer and Doug Wilson and the coaching staff, how and where do we even do this before we decide on making this transaction happen, if it even makes sense, right? So this is like two or three steps down the line of the decision-making process. But just going back to the bigger picture here, a lot of fans, they're already bought in. I'm sure players in the dressing room and guys enjoying their summer vacation right now as they get to hear this report and this news, and I guess it's a rumor to some extent. They know what kind of teammate Patrick is, and they know what he wants right now more than ever. He wants a chance at the Cup. He's always wanted that, but he knows time is ticking. He knows what the Sharks did last year. It's no surprise that he would want this opportunity. Again, when I heard initial rumors that Patrick would potentially be going to Los Angeles or joining the Avs, I mean, Colorado makes a little bit more sense. They're a more competitive team, and he could kind of be that big brother figure like he had become in Toronto the last couple of years. But it just doesn't make sense for him to be, especially if he's got that no-move clause, him to be in a losing, frustrating, unsuccessful situation for what is his last year. This is his last year under the current contract. So I'll close it out with two pretty major thoughts here. and I'll cut right to the chase on the odds for me of this happening. Patrick Marleau back to the Sharks via trade from Toronto. The odds look a bit long for me. I'm not a betting man, but if you made me put money on this, I'd wager that it doesn't happen. And that may hurt to hear that for some people. I'm sorry to ruin the fun if you were thinking that it was likely. I just think, and if I had to put specific numbers on it, I feel like the odds are 49% or less. It's less than 50% that this happens. And that's still, look, I've seen crazier things happen, and I understand there's familiarity on both sides, and there are ways, I guess, in creative ways this could happen. So I'm not saying 0%, but I might be saying 1%. It's anywhere from 1 to 49%. I just don't feel right now like it's 60 or 70%. It's way too high. And maybe 45% is way too high. But it's somewhere less than 50% and realistically less than likely. Now, that's my professional opinion on this. My personal opinion? I'd be thrilled to be wrong about what I just said. All right? Just want you to know that. I'd be thrilled to be wrong in saying that I think it's unlikely. And the last thought here was what I want most. And I think what you all want most too. By the spring of 2020, you want Patrick Marleau and you want Joe Thornton both approaching the playoffs again and both with the opportunity again to chase the Stanley Cup. And I do feel like whether it's together or whether it's separate, you want both these guys to be on winning teams, feeling healthy, and feeling sentimental about another crack, which who knows how many more you're going to get at raising the Stanley Cup. So that does it for this episode of the podcast as well as the YouTube video. And since I'm not sure where you might be consuming this, I'll plug everything. The podcast, it's on Apple iTunes, it's on Google Play, it's on Spotify. My YouTube channel, I would love your subscription over there. I'm really trying to put out as much good content and timely content as I can for this hockey offseason, as well as baseball. If you're an A's fan, I'm all over that. As well as the channels I'm sure you're already familiar with, Twitter and Instagram. I am a regular on those platforms, so I will see you there. Until next time, thanks for checking out this episode. I'm Brody Brazil, and yes, that is my real name.